Well, I was just going to say, back in our day, we had the old pen maps, and a different color pen represented a different crime, and it was amazing how you could just pinpoint. It really does cluster up, and you know where you need to set your resources. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That's exactly right, and I will not confirm or deny. I just know that some people used to break into the commander's office when they were eventually got to pin maps and move the pins around and screw everything up. But I'm just saying that might have happened, but I cannot confirm nor deny that it did.
Well, statute of limitations has run out, so you're safe.
And
this pins, is true.
But those pins might have been in some type of shape, right? Like, right? I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you talking about a penis symbol on a map?
I'm just saying, hypothetically, there was a lot of things going on back there.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So that was your way of telling the commander what he was a dick?
Sometimes. So then, yeah, Steve, you're correct. We eventually got to and I only saw the butcher block paper in transit because we didn't use pin maps the same way. We used them this way. But once I went to the NYPD and we moved over the computerized statistics that we're talking about, there were still pin maps. And even after the computers, some people still did them manually, A, out of old habit, but B, also it's just a quick representation. I can move things around. Not everyone had computers. There weren't terminals at every desk like there are now. Everyone's got laptops now. So it was just a migration into it. It was a transition and a shift of the way of doing things. And so what we would do is we would then look at these maps, and like I said, there's 7 major crimes. Part 1 crimes, it's murder, felony assault, rape,
robbery, arson,
grand larceny, auto, and grand larceny, regular thefts over $1,000. And those are your 7 majors that every police chief in the country is measured by their crime. All the misdemeanor crimes, you could have misdemeanor crimes going through the roof. You might have a quality of life issue, but you're not going to get dinged on your Part 1 crimes. That all gets reported up to the FBI, right, through CJIS and through the NCIC and the UCR, the Uniform Crime Reporting, which is now shifting to NIBRS, which
National Incident-Based Reporting System.
That's the one. See, we got you for the analogies too, Morgan. You're good with those acronyms.
Analogy would be like NCIC is right.
The acronyms. So
I can do this because Tommy's going to kick my ass the next time we all get together.
I'll be gentle.
Yeah, that's what my doctor said right before my colonoscopy. That didn't go well either. Although I passed with flying colors, and I say that if you're over 50, better get one.
Yes, a PSA.
Not a police service area, but a public safety announcement. A prostate safety announcement. Hey, but talk a little bit too about. I know some of these answers to this because I've talked to some NYPD guys. But going to a CompStat meeting, if you weren't prepared, you would rather rip your own eyelids off and walk through, the sea than it was to get your ass reamed at one of these CompStat hearings. Is that kind of a fair statement?
I would say the very early ones in 93, 94, 95 were wicked bad, like very confrontational. Human resources did not exist. It was all out berating and the worst possible managerial approaches on things, swearing, fist fights. People have lunged over tables. It was bad. I think they eventually settled into a place where it was getting really good and really effective with levels of professionalism, but you also knew who was the boss. And when they spoke, you understood the commanders were in charge and you better get your act together. And you know what? They gave you a pass. I'd say they were fair. You came in new, or, you got a new emerging problem and you didn't quite get a handle on it yet, but you come back next month, you better have a story. And I think what ultimately they were looking for was, are you trying? Like, are you doing something? Yes, I am. What's your plan? X, Y, Z. Okay, sounds good. You know what? Did you ever think of doing A, B, and C instead of X, Y, Z? No, I hadn't thought of that, Chief. Thank you. All right. Well, you got 28 days. Make sure you come back. Next time you come back, this problem's been eradicated. And then there was the philosophy, right? There's 4 steps in this. accurate and timely intelligence, rapid deployment, effective tactics, and relentless follow-up. You can't eradicate this crime problem and then just walk away from it, and then 2 weeks later it reemerges again. Like, you have to say, like, we got rid of it and we're holding the lid on it and it's never coming back. And so I think they went from insane and violent, wicked meetings to it really got fair. It was tense and it was hard, but it was fair. And then they eventually got to the point where weak commanders who did not know what they were really doing, who got elevated too fast, started playing a game of gotcha. And I got a perfect example of that. The stop, question, and possibly frisk. And I use the word possibly because not every stop and question ends up with a frisk. Okay? But the stop and question that the NYPD took a beating for, and that de Blasio paid out sums of money and violations, and he changed policies. And Kelly and Bloomberg said, no, we're not deviating. Stop, question, and frisk works, right? Stop, question, possibly frisk work. UF 250s is the report that you fill out. So NYPD jargon and vernacular is, 250s. But it's a Terry stop, Terry v. Ohio, right? Those are allowed to happen. They're constitutionally protected, and you're allowed to do that. And I think all police have a terrible PR arm, right? No, but they never had good PR coming out of the police. And the stop, question, and frisk. And so why do you stop and question and possibly frisk so many people? I'll tell you why. Because if you are engaging with the kids, and they're mostly kids, young adults who are banging really hard out there, and they are driving the quality of life, and they are driving the violence in this community. If you engage with them, if you pretext them with, they're loitering on the corner, they're motor vehicle violations and all these kinds of things, they actually allow you, they give you the legal authority to engage and find out what's going on. And you can inquire, and you can decide to say, all right, everything's fine. Let me explain why I stopped you. You're a good kid. Go on your way. Or, yeah, I did see you urinating. I'm going to write you a urinating summons in the street. Or I stop you for urinating. I run you. You get a warrant. And the next thing I know, I just got a really bad guy off the street, right? All of this is good, solid, sound police work. Now, that being said, to prove my point that it eventually evolved to a game of gotcha is they didn't look at the numbers for what they were actually doing. They just counted the numbers. And so commanders were telling cops, I want 250s, I want 250s, I want 250s, I want you to stop guys, stop guys, stop guys, stop guys. They didn't take the time, nor did they have the knowledge to understand, no, you're stopping people for this condition, in this location, during these times, and this is what you're looking for. I don't want 100 stops. I want 5 quality stops of people who are really in the mix. And the strategy, the results got lost in the strategy. The strategy was to reduce crime when people said, commanders who are not competent are just saying, give me the numbers, give me the numbers, give me the. They didn't even know what they were doing. They didn't even know what they were asking for. They didn't know why they were asking for. So the evolution that I saw from CompStat was wild and crazy, off the hook nuts, to really fair, but very hard and right and focused to a game of gotcha. And we're just commanders who didn't know what they're doing. Just give me the numbers, give me the numbers, give me the numbers. And then they're sitting there going, why isn't crime going down? And it's kind of did and everything, but not to the point it was. And now you're getting that bad rap for quote unquote, terrorizing the neighborhoods. That's what they feel, that the cops are the terrorists. Not true. But that's what they felt. And so that's where it got lost. You're stopping kids that you should not be stopping.
Correct. You were stopping them for a day. You were stopping them for a day off. Like, it became that kind of crazy roll call. You'd hear commanders or, again, not for me in the detective squad, but you'd hear guys in uniform patrol telling people, don't come in tonight. You used to hear that with a book of summonses, right? Don't come in unless you gave me 5 parkers. Now it was like, don't come in unless you stop 10 people. And then the bigger question I always used to think is, what are you stopping them for? These guys can't even articulate that.
If there are 10 people to stop that are getting to the criteria that meet the test of reasonable suspicion for, like you say, Tommy, a Terry stop, person's place, time of day. Do we have intel that this area is a high crime area? Is he wearing a long overcoat and it's 100 degrees outside? I mean, give me something here. Just don't force me to go out and stop somebody for the mere act of stopping them so you can get a stat. That stat doesn't solve crime. The quality contacts you're talking about, Tommy, that's what solves crime is using your knowledge, skills, abilities, experience, and saying, I'm stopping this guy and this girl because, and I can articulate 9 different factors why.
Well, and plus you're being proactive versus reactive. You're not waiting for somebody to call a crime in when it's too late. You're being proactive to find out who's on the street, why are they out there? And like you said, these are tools in your toolbox that the Constitution has allowed. It's been reviewed and it's been approved. When people overuse it, just like those commanders just wanted numbers, that's when it screws up a good thing for all the cops out on the street.
And it screws it up for the community too. And I know you mean that, but that's what we're there for. We're there for the community. And I love police work, and I'll chase bad guys all day. But if there's no crime, then there's no reason to have police officers, right? But there are, unfortunately. And then when you're allowing that to override into and not be able to see, your blinders are on, you only see people in the community and not be able to separate the difference between the good and the bad, that's when it all goes south. And then this is
when you start painting everybody with the same brush, that's when problems happen. You got to have the ability to discriminate between lawful activity, questionable activity, and obviously illegal activity. But the whole purpose of stopping people on questionable activity is to quickly determine whether or not it is illegal activity, and do you have any right to continue holding them? I mean, God dang it, I'm starting to sound like a lawyer.
I will tell you from the detective side of the house, right? I'm a believer in accountability. You should be accountable to what you do. Your cases you should be held accountable for what's going on inside your case. So if Tommy came to me and he wanted to know what was up with my case, I owe him that to keep that case folder up and make sure it's right. But I have to tell you though, not every idea that came out of CompStat was a good idea, right? You have a shooting in the neighborhood, and then you're going to do zero enforcement on traffic stops. So now you're going to penalize the people who lived in the community who were just on their way home with zero enforcement because somebody got shot there. You turned the whole, it almost, again, I guess the terminology would be occupier, but it actually turned the community against you because you were writing summonses to these people and the sergeants were that's what they want to CompStat. And the whole thing got turned around in a place that was crazy. I think, Tommy, and you tell me if I'm right, I think when you were in the squad, there were 25 of us?
Our biggest staffing was 37 between the squad and the RIP.
And we're all catching 400 and change a year?
Yep.
400 cases a year. This is 1 square mile.
And what's a RIP, Tommy?
The Robbery Enhancement Program, which eventually became the RAM, which is the Robbery Apprehension Module. It's that little unit that I talked to you about before, where I said there's one unit within the detective squad that's just dedicated to robberies.
And then when the new police commissioner came in, then it became the BRAM. So you went from the RIP to the RAM to the BRAM. Yeah, everybody had a new idea. You know what I mean?
It sounds like the Sugar Hill Gang. I said a hip, a hip to the hibbity. No.
Well, I have to tell you just real quick, sitting there as a guy who spent his whole career there, watching them call the names and it's just what difference does that make?
Well, we took a quick break, a pause for the cause, because I had to get something to drink. And for you folks drinking at home, yes, I'm joining you. I showed Tommy this. I'll show you guys too. It is my Chime Grand Reserve Ale, barrel fermented, bottled in 2018. It is 4 years old. I'm breaking it open. 10.5% alcohol, was stored in French oak, American oak, and whiskey barrels. And it is, I'm telling you, freaking awesome. So
not to be outdone, I'm using 2-week-old Pure Life healthy water, purified water while we're on this, because somebody's got to be the responsible adult here.
I'm with you on that one. I'm off camera, so I'm using the Delta, little small bottle purified water that I found in my backpack before I go to Texas, so I don't get jammed up at TSA tomorrow.
And you guys are probably wondering, why do I have a pair of pliers in my drawer? It's because when you get bottles like this with the cork in there, they get so stuck, you actually have to, there we go. And here it comes. You're going to hear the pop here in a second. And here it goes.
Nice.
Success.
That's
Anyway,
too
back to our
technical for me,
regularly
Tommy.
scheduled podcast. I am joining you in the drinking now because it is that time of day. So, hey, what we want to get into, a couple of the cases. But Tommy, you mentioned one that I want to start off with first, and it's the cold case you talked about. Because when you said that right there, that's like the other stuff is like standard stuff. You talk to cops, yeah. But when you mentioned this cold case, I got goosebumps. I mean, It's like, damn.
So I think this case is exactly what you're looking for when you say I want to do this work and how can I help. And I'm not trying to get corny. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of cops that do the police work for very selfish reasons, and it's all about them and all about getting paid, and they make money, and they work on overtime, and they really don't have any. Mike was talking about empathy before, and whether you can be empathetic or sympathetic or whatever your life has presented you with. You're doing really God's work here. There's Vernon Gebereth. I want to pay homage to Vernon Gebereth, a mentor of mine, former Bronx commander of the homicide squad up there. And then he had a very successful career doing practical homicide investigation consulting, all running classes all across the country.
I have two two of his books sitting on my desk right now.
Yep. I mean, that is the Bible.
Yes, it is.
For homicide investigations. And I have an autographed copy that Vernon signed for me that is cherished in my home, in my bookcase. Unfortunately, I'm moving in a couple of months, and we started packing up some stuff, so I don't have it handily right now. But that being said, when he says we work for God, I mean, this is the type of work that really, really, really presents it. I want to give you an example. I want to set this up, and then I'll get into the cold case squad. There were times as the commander of detectives, and I believe it was Darrell Baum. I believe that was the case that this actually happened. And Darrell Baum is involved in the Damien Hardy and the violence back and forth. And he was Mike Tyson's bodyguard for a while. And this is all in the news. So if anyone wants to fact check me, they can do it. I took a phone call as the commander of detectives. Sometimes the family calls and they're trying to talk to the detective and they're not getting anywhere. And then Michael called me up and he'll yell from the other side of the room and go, "Lieutenant, you want to take this call from the victim's family?" And of course I want to do that. And the first thing I say when I get on the phone is, "Hey, this is Lieutenant Joyce. I just want to say that I'm really sorry for your loss." And they're like, yeah. When can I get his car back? And when can I get all his jewelry back? I was like, okay, so they don't really care that their victim, their relative got killed, right? You get those cases. Don't get me wrong. However, even if sometimes the victim is tied up in some bad stuff, there's still family members that are living legitimate lives and trying to live honorably and peacefully. And they call up and they're hurting and they're seeing that this scourge of this drugs and how the kid got caught up as this like ultimate failure for them as a family member or a parent. Right. And then like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. I knew I couldn't control the kid. He was in the hood. He's running around with the gangbangers. He found something with them. He did it. And so you extend your sympathies to them and they say, "Thank you, I appreciate it." And we say, "We're going to work really hard for them." And they accept that and you do that. And then you have the other victims, and I have two cases, Ashley Sims in the 7-9, and then this cold case. The victim in this case, his name is Isidore Pact. And like when you really touch these victims' families and you have long-term relationships that go way, way past the case and the trial. And I was taught that someone asked the question, when do you think a detective's job is done on a murder investigation? And you'll hear a lot of different answers, but there is only one answer. It's when the final appeal in the Supreme Court has been exhausted. That's when their job is done. Now, you might hear somebody say, "Well, when we make an arrest or when after we go to trial." I think you're muted, Morgan.
I was because I was drinking, and I said no. I said, no, really, you're just getting started. When you make an arrest, or even if it goes to trial, you are just getting started.
Exactly. But unfortunately, detectives who answer that way, they haven't been taught the right way, and they don't know it better, right? They're just young, and we're cycling, people through, and
yeah. But Tommy, but the problem with that, when they're not taught correctly, is then their view of the world stops at that, and they don't do the follow up. They don't go the extra mile. They don't make the extra call. They don't go to a conference, make that one extra conversation. It's like, no, I'm done. Time to move on to something else. And like you, and you're going to talk about it because I know what it did in your mind. I can already see it works on you day and night. You're sitting there. What else can I do? Who else can I call? What other step? Kind of like ComStat. What other thing can I do to move this case forward? It's never over.
Yep, that's correct. And until the final appeal in Supreme Court, it's over and it's done. However, you might be fortunate enough, unfortunate for the family, but fortunate enough to be able to have been a part of these people's lives, is that and you continue a relationship long after that's all done, and you still talk to the families. And in one case more specifically than the other, I do so. One lasted for years, and then we've all moved on. And then we have others too. With the Quincell case, Mike, is another one that pops in. We had a really strong relationship with the family there as well, and that's another good caper we could talk about for sure. There's plenty of them, Morgan. We might have to do volumes 2 and 3. I'll be honest.
Well, no, I think we're going to, because I think the one case I want you to talk about now. Let's talk about the Holocaust survivor, the cold case. To me, it's one of those. Just what you were setting it up. I'm not going to steal your thunder, but just what you're setting up when you think of what somebody goes through, only to have it stolen from them. It's kind of like the soldier who gets through war, who gets through all the stuff, sees his buddy blows up, he comes back home and he gets robbed and killed on a street corner, minding in his own business.
So Mr. and Mrs. Isidore Pact were Holocaust survivors who I want to say I don't remember what year. I will say it's been a while since I talked, but in the 40s, they eventually made their way back to New York City, and Mr. and Mrs. Pact came without their only child. They had a child born in Europe, lost a child to the Nazis, and when they eventually reunited, they emigrated to the United States, but without their child. They then went on to have 2 more children. Miriam and Harry was their children, both born in America. For many, many years on Claremont Avenue in the Bronx, in the confines of the 4A Precinct, centralized Bronx. So if you're familiar, you look at a map, you look at the middle of the Bronx, right in that area. Isidore Pact, I want to say it was 592 Claremont Parkway, I think it was. Again, this is 20 years ago, folks, so give me a little bit of slack on the memory, but I think I'm pretty good. And he's had a rule that the tailor shop haberdashery that Isidore Pact was running was, once it started getting later in the afternoon, no one was allowed to freely walk in. They were only allowed to lock the doors. They would remain open for business, but only with locked doors, and only let people in that they were familiar with, because they did still have customers who needed to come pick up their clothing, their tailor work, or continue to commerce with them. But there was a certain threshold that they were told that they were not allowed to open the doors for. Well, of course, a 17-year-old employee, who ironically eventually became a police officer, and this is where the case has some interesting twists, he's 17 years old at the time, and he's a local kid, and he's working in the store, and he makes the mistake of letting these 2 guys in. They immediately push their way in. He unlocks the door. They push their way in. They hold everyone up in the front, and they take Isidore Pact at gunpoint to the back of the store, and they say, open the safe, give us your money. And Isidore Pact is insisting that he doesn't have access. There's nothing to steal. They're wasting their time. You shouldn't do this. And one shot rings out, and Isidore Pact is shot and killed. And the 2 suspects flee, and they leave out the front door of the haberdashery. And this is 1971. And they turn right, and they flee. And one runs towards the subway station.
Hey, Tommy, you probably mentioned this. Tell us again where it's at and what precinct it's at. Kind of geographically tell us.
The 48th precinct in the Bronx, New York, probably around the center of the borough.
Okay.
So at that point, the investigation, takes place. They interview the people inside the store. They interview a girl. Her name was Letitia Green. I think her name was. Yeah, Letitia Green. And there was some shoddy paperwork done by the detectives. I'm not going to go as far as saying why. I'm not really sure. Were they preoccupied, not competent? I don't know. But in reading in 2004, we resurrect the case, and I'll go through that. But there was shoddy paperwork. So there's a Letitia Green. We need to find her. And basically, the case goes cold within 2 or 3 weeks. No real progress on the case. And Letitia Green, and this is why I'm telling you now before I tell you how we get the case, and then I can go backwards. Letitia Green goes missing right away. And so the detectives can't find Letitia Green, the witness, if you will. And the detectives are like, oh, Letitia must know a lot more than she's letting on. So now the hunt for Letitia in 1971 is the only thing that happens, and that goes completely cold, completely stale, and nothing gets done. So fast forward to 2004, and I get assigned to the cold case squad. And just to give some context for that, in a city of 35,000 police officers and a city of 8 million people, the cold case squad had a couple of supervisors and about 30 detectives. When I got there were over 8,000 open, documented homicides that were unsolved. And that only went back to the previous 10 to 15 years. Even before that, there's even a lot more. And if you go back in history, there's tens and tens of thousands of homicides.
Tommy, the other reason I asked what precinct it was in, because you were in the 7-9. This one's out of the 4-8. How does it go about with the cold case squad? Do you try and keep it based upon the precinct, or do you guys have, even though you have authority throughout everywhere, it's not like your authority ends because you cross into another precinct, but how's it, as you talk about the process, tell us about how is it that you, with where you're at, is getting a case from another precinct as part of this cold case squad?
Yeah, so when you get to the cold case squad, you are citywide, and you have the geographical area and the authority over all those cases with conferral of the local detective squad. But it is a citywide unit. And then each group is focused, like my group was focused on the Bronx. There's another group focused on Brooklyn. But you could go anywhere, and you could handle any case from anywhere based on certain things. I could have worked on Brooklyn cases that I was connected to through Mike. Mike would call up and say, look, we're not doing anything on this case. We don't have the time. The new cases are still coming in. You want to work on this case, I can give you the fill-in, and you guys can pick it up from there. That could have happened. But you have a focus, but not an absolute boundary. So when I got to the cold case squad, the area that I focused on was the Bronx. So everything that ever happened in the Bronx historically would fall under our authority. The rules were very, very loose. If someone in the Queens team or the Manhattan team wanted to work on Bronx or Brooklyn cases, they could do so. It's all on handshakes and just doing the right thing, if you will.
Yeah, but if you're in the Bronx and somebody's in Queens, I mean, you still run into logistical issues because travel time, getting from one place to another, having to interview witnesses. It's like you want to go from the Bronx to to Queens. Why not just have somebody, in Queens, handle the case or do the follow-up?
100%, which is why I'm against centralization of homicide squads in cities. And that's another story for another day. That's volume.
Answer one question. We had this question. I can't remember who it was from, Murph. Was it from John Kufta? We're talking about there's only one place in New York or even around the world that has the word "the" in front of it, and it's like you got Queens, you got Brooklyn, but it's the Bronx.
Bronx, yeah.
Why is it the Bronx, like the Ohio State?
I'll tell you why. Because Bronx, Bronx, is the borough, but there was a family, Bronck, Bronx, and they used to say, "Let's go up and see the Bronx." And then eventually, when the 1600s were the Bronx, who were from the Dutch, right? When they were in that territory, which was north of Manhattan, they would say, let's go up and see the Bronx. And so when they renamed the borough Bronx, it became the Bronx. That's one story that I've always heard. And when I worked up there, that's what was told.
Having never heard a story before, dude, that sounds like a good one to me. We're going to go with it. So the mystery, one mystery has been solved on this podcast. Back to our regularly scheduled podcast. If you're with us, that's
a drink.
That's a drink. Okay.
You know, you shipped us headsets. You should have shipped me one of those Chimay as well, by the way.
Hey, look, I bought dinner and wine last time. What else do you want, you cheapskate?
Yeah, well, which is very unorthodox because you were in my town. I should have bought, but you insisted. You're very generous.
We were not in your town. We were in.
That's correct.
We were
Afton.
And we were in a neutral location.
That's correct. True. Fair point. So, getting back to the case. So I get to the cold case squad. I triage a whole bunch of cases. I'm trying to get a lay of the land on what the volume of work looks like. And I get what they call the police communication. It's a letter to the police commissioner that they shift through channels, and it finally ends up on my desk. Is where it belongs. And it's basically Miriam and Harry Pack, the children, demanding justice for their father. And they claim that nobody in the New York City Police Department, or for that matter, the criminal justice system in upstate New York, the New York State Police, nobody cares about them. And there's a series of letters written to the governor, Pataki, and Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, not Andrew Cuomo, and just a series of outreaches by the family asking for somebody to look at this case. And I don't know why. Maybe they just got the brand new commander in the cold case squad who was full of piss and vinegar and really enthusiastic about this new assignment. But I said, okay, and I'll call Miriam and I'll say, I'm here now. Can't change anything that's happened in the past. I don't know what happened. And what I always promised every single family that I ever spoke to in the cold case squad is I said, I cannot promise results. I can only promise effort. And I said, if you understand that, we're good. If you're demanding an arrest, I can't do that. And I won't make that promise. And it's unreasonable, especially with the time that's passed. And more often than not, the families were like, you know what? I believe you. And all we really want is hope. And we want someone to care. And the term never forget, right? Like we were saying never forget long before 9/11. And Mike and I were together on 9/11. So that's volume 5, by the way. So we have a whole bunch of stuff with that too.
We're going to start a whole new podcast for you two guys.
Hey, Tales of the NYPD, man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work. So anyway, so this is door back. I get it. I talk to Miriam. She hits me, and I'm like, man, the pain in this woman in 2004 for her father, and the story that they have on how they got to the United States, and the fact that he was gunned down in this brutal, vicious manner over some nonsense robbery that the guy didn't even have a lot of money. It's so unnecessary. And I'm like, we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out. And so I dig the case out. I find the case. I get it, and I read it, and I sit there, and I say, wow, this whole thing probably revolves around Letitia Green. We just got to find her. And Morgan, you're going to laugh when you hear this, but something was available to me and the detective Mark Tebbins in 2004 that were not available to the detectives in the 70s or even in the 80s for that matter. There's a little tool called Public Records and a search tool called Accurate from LexisNexis.
Which, by the way, maybe a wife of yours worked at LexisNexis at one point. Is that the nexus for how you met LexisNexis, Susan?
No, can I tell you, this case is the reason why I got a job at LexisNexis.
Ah, okay.
Because I told this story at IACP 2005 in Miami
Dude, I was there. Why didn't you come hit me up? That was South
Because I
Beach.
was on the beach partying.
So was I on
at
South
the
Beach.
Chief.
The best. I think that's the best host Chiefs night ever held.
I
Hey,
would
Mike.
agree.
Hey, Mike, you still there? You doing all right,
Mike?
brother?
Mike, yes.
I'll call you, Mike.
If you were on video, you cheap bastard, we wouldn't have to keep asking if you were there.
No, then
I'll
you'd
call
see
you,
me
Mike.
nodding off. You know what I mean, Tommy? Hey, I got it. The lieutenant's at the stage. Go ahead, sir.
This is like the first rookie that gets in the police car with you, and you say, "Do not touch the radio. Do not talk. Do not touch anything in the car. Just sit there and shut up and don't say a word."
The lieutenants, the bosses at NYPD, the lieutenants, they solve all the crimes. So I'm in. I want intrigued. I'm intrigued to see how this goes. Go ahead.
So we have, and I'll tell the story about how I got my post law enforcement job. But so I immediately jump on the tool, and Mark Tebbins and I are sitting there, and we're running these queries in a product called Accurate LexisNexis's public record search tool. And what we come to realize is that when you look at the reports, Letitia's name is spelled different ways all the time. Letitia, Leith, Leth, all of the variations of that. And then add the green. There's a green without an E, with an E, with an E, without an E, right? It's a complete disaster. But, and this is not a plug for the product, but this is a plug for a good detective who knows how to work computers and realizes that the misspelling and just do the work. And so Mark Tebbins sat at the computer and plugged in all the different variations. And then he finds a DD5, which is the follow-up informational report for Detective Division number 5, report number 5. That's not sequential. That's the report number. He sees that there's information that she may have fled to Georgia. So then we focus our queries for all the variations of spellings for Letitia Green in Georgia, and we come up with a Letitia Green in the right age group. So she's like now 50 years old, who lives in Augusta, Georgia.
Hey, when you said fled to Georgia, do you think the information was your feeling was she fled because of this case or another reason?
Yes, for this case, because we think
she was at risk. If she fled, she's at risk of something.
She lived in the apartment above the tailor shop.
Oh, okay.
She's looking out the window at just the right time to see the perps flee. You know what she really was, right? She's the setup and the lookout. So you kind of read the case and you know that's where they're going. And then like the detectives are like, we need to talk to him. You know, after she said, I don't know anything, but this is what I saw. And the detectives are like, we need to follow up with her because her story's not making, like there's some gaps in it. And then all of a sudden she goes off the face of the earth. It's like, you know what's going on, right? So Letitia Green, we determined she's the critical component of finding this perpetrator. And oh my God, the name of the perpetrator escapes me, but
it's not important. He's a shitbag.
Yeah, he is.
And they don't deserve airtime anyway. We try not to give shitbags airtime. So
Letitia Green, Mark Tebbins finds Letitia Green in Augusta, Georgia, that fits the age group. And we're like, could this be? What do you think? So we literally played dial for dollars, right? So there's about 5 or 6 different associations to Letitia Green and a bunch of different addresses and a bunch of different phone numbers. And all we do is call and say, hey, how you doing? This is Detective Tebbins. This is Lieutenant Joyce from the NYPD's Cold Case Squad. We're looking for Letitia Green. And I'd say about the 4th or 5th phone call, someone says, yeah, I know Letitia Green. I'll have her call you right back. So she calls back, and we don't know if it's her. And we say, hi, Letitia, how are you? Thanks for calling us back. We appreciate it. She's like, yeah, no problem. She's like, we're like, we want to talk to you about a murder that took place on Claremont Parkway in the Bronx, 1971. And she goes, I don't know nothing about that. And she hung up.
As a trained investigator, that's my first clue that she does know something about this.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So I turned to Detective Mark Tebbins and his partner, Pablo Mas. And I said, you guys got golf clubs? because you're going to Augusta, Georgia. And hopefully after you get a really good statement from this witness, the local cops will get you on Augusta and you can play a round of golf.
Play at the Masters. Yes.
Exactly. So that was the trade-off. I negotiated with them that if they can get a statement that's productive for this investigation, that they can spend an extra day down there and play a round of golf.
Oh my God! What a you are such a good guy, Tommy.
I am such a good guy, and I don't think my detectives really ever appreciate it.
Mike,
maybe now they do.
Mike, is Tommy a good guy? What were you saying about Tommy when he wasn't there? When it was just you and I on the call.
Best boss ever.
There you go. See, that's what I'm talking about.
And that's actually what he said.
So anyway,
he said that, yeah.
So Pablo and Mark go down. They go get Letitia. They bring her in with the local authorities helping out. They were great guys and gals. And Letitia is kind of playing the 2-foot shuffle, whatever you want to call it. And she's playing the game, which we've seen hundreds and hundreds of times. And finally, an Augusta, Georgia detective slams his hands on the desk and he goes, "Listen, Letitia, either you're on the bus or you're in front of the bus. And I don't think these guys came down to New York for some nonsense to come down here. So you need to get on the bus."
I have never heard that. I like that saying. Either you're on the bus or you're in front of the bus.
And she just turned around and goes, "All right, I get it." And she goes, "That was my boyfriend who did the robbery. And I know exactly who he is. And here's his name. And it's coming to me, and I'll respect the fact that we shouldn't name his name because he shouldn't get any credit for anything in his life. He did die in jail, but I'll get to that.
Well, that's good. But yeah, no recognition for shitbags. But
he died a very painful death of cancer while waiting trial on this case.
Wait a minute. So, was it the same thing you asked that one guy to die of that we told you about that we were meeting with the San Diego, that New York cop that went bad that was arrested? You said,
that guy. Yeah. Michael Dowd. He should die of ass cancer as well. So. I mean, if you have an enemy and you want them to suffer, I mean, ass cancer is probably
the way to do it. Yeah. Thankfully, I had my colonoscopy. I'm all clear, so that won't be me.
Well, that's good to hear. And I too myself have been on regular colonoscopies, which is another story. That's volume 10 because I got good colonoscopy stories too.
And to all our listeners, we're sorry you had to listen to all that part right there.
So anyway,
oh my God, who knew this was going to be a colonoscopy show? Anyway,
we can go. Listen, you think Rogan has got the friggin' thing on podcast? You guys, if you bring enough of the right people, we can take these stories all over the place. Anywhere you want to go, we can go.
Maybe you should explain to them what the turnarounds in the 7-9 squad were like.
Oh, the turnaround parties, we had those too, but I'm sure it paled in comparison to NYPD.
Yeah. We have a lot of crazy stories. And thank you, Steve, earlier for pointing out that statute of limitations are expired on most of them. So, yes.
Well, only thing wait a minute. The only thing that usually doesn't expire is murder. You're not going to admit to that, are you?
No. Everything's short, but everything is done by now. We get Letitia, we get the right statement from her, we get the named perpetrator. Now we have to come back to New York, do the records checks, and try to find this person. Fast forward to
wait a minute. Hold on, time out for a second. This is I don't want to say this was too easy, but when you said that it was like shoddy paperwork, was it that they just didn't interview her persistently enough, or was even if they had done a very good, aggressive, persistent interview, would she not have admitted it at that time? Do you think?
I think the way it was in 1971, I think they were. I'm sure they were diligent.
Just more checking the boxes.
But yes, but there was also a lot of gaps. And I talk about this very fondly about the CompStat process and what levels of accountability that they did implement that made cases so much more thorough and so much tighter. I'm sure the prosecutors appreciated it. So there were always a lot of gaps in older cases. And that's why when you got a case folder, everything was in that case folder, right? Way before electronic case management systems and all stuff. And that's why every single piece of paper, every matchbook cover, every napkin had some scribble in it. I mean, there were literally old cases that had handwritten notes on a napkin that were tucked in the pages. And if you went through that case folder and you didn't read that napkin, you missed the whole thing.
That was in Vernon's book too. He talked about one time where they had written it on paper. I can't remember what kind of paper, but it was the kind that aged as it aged. You couldn't read it anymore. And it's like, but that's the importance of when you do a case review of a cold case, you got to go back and look at everything. Collect everything, look at everything. You and I'll talk later. I'll pick your brains offline about a cold case I'm working on actually down in Roanoke right now. But anyway, that was digression. Number 7, back to our regularly scheduled podcast. Drink. Go ahead.
I don't want to break Tommy's flow because he's flowing now like a big river. So I don't want to break his flow. But I will tell you, like managing the cold cases in the 7-9. There were 400 open ones just in that command alone that dated back to the 40s.
1.1 square miles, and you had 400 open cases?
They just were open, right? And they kept them in the basement next to the boiler room. So when the basement flooded, but this is the importance of it, right? You talk about a case management system now. Like my kid on the job, everything is on the computer. Everything is on his phone, right? Everything that they do is digital. But man, when they flooded the basement, we used to have to take out the case files and leave the papers out to dry, like individual sheets, so that they wouldn't stick together.
Yep. I went to the 5th precinct that was built in 1885 or something, and I went to look for an old homicide, and I go into the basement like Mike's talking about, and this building is from the 1880s. And the guy is sitting there, and they're still, this is no bullshit. In 2004, they're still shoveling coal into a burner, right, for heating the building. And I go, look, I'm looking for these boxes from 1950, 1960, and such like that. And where are they? And I need to, because I got a lead on a case from somebody who's incarcerated that they said when they were a kid, and the guy's like 90 years old now, and he wants to talk. And the guy goes, you see that burner right there, the heater? I go, yeah. He goes, we feed that coal to heat the building. He goes, sometimes we run out of coal.
Oh, my God. Don't tell me.
And I said, couldn't you burn anything but the homicides? He goes, we burned what we had. And I said, are you kidding me? And like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm leaning more towards it's true than it's not. Mike, I know you've never heard that story from me. Do you doubt anything that I just said?
Oh my God.
It's crazy. It was crazy. You can't make up the things that really happened. This is the NYPD for these years and all the years back and all the stories. When they say the truth is crazier than fiction, you couldn't make it up.
But that wasn't NYPD. That was that an NYPD employee, or was that just some building employee that decided to use the homicide cases as fuel?
No, an NYPD employee. They used to call them the broom. So they were probably someone who was like a danger to himself and others. So they said, don't go out on patrol. Keep the building clean, and you're fine.
You know, if you really think about it, right? God forbid you had a fire in one of the station houses that were busy, that had the homicides stored in them. You know, those old homicides, they went up in smoke. I mean, again, we talk about Pearson Place, right, Tommy, where they used to keep all of the stolen property. They had a flood there, all crime scene stuff destroyed.
You know, this reminds me of I on vacation one time, believe it or not, I ran into some 2 ladies that were police officers with the formerly known as the Royal Ulster Constabulary, but the Police Service of Northern Ireland. When they transitioned to a peacekeeping force versus a paramilitary force, they had so many unsolved homicides and cases. But guess what? Still members of what was called PIRA, the Provisional IRA, went in and blew up evidence locations and laboratories to destroy all the evidence. And to your point, Mike, when that stuff's gone, it's gone. There is no, I mean, you don't, unless it's been digitally saved somewhere, there is no getting back a single scrap of paper that has the suspect's name on it that goes up in flames in a boiler somewhere.
Yeah. That's crazy. So let's get back to the case. So we got Letitia Green.
I'm sorry, digression number, what was that, 8? It doesn't matter. Time for a drink. Here we go.
I'm going to have to get you guys membership in AA after this interview.
I'm sipping, Steve. I'm sipping.
Sipping.
So we got Letitia Green. We got her statement. We're in good. We got a named perpetrator. Now we got to look at the other witnesses we have. And the rest of them were not so great, but remember that kid that opened the door?
Yep.
Okay, let's go back to him.
Well, hey, hold on a second. When you say you have a named perpetrator, obviously one of the first things you would have done at that point is find out, is the dude still alive?
Yes, and he was. We did like I did say before, but I'll repeat for the listeners. We did all our computer checks. We tried to figure out where we think he's located. We found him in Stamford, Connecticut. He's alive and well and available. And he was not incarcerated as much as we can tell. So he was available to do the crime in 1971, which is a critical component. So just because she's naming him, you got to say, was he incarcerated at that time? Or was he living in the Bronx at that time? Was he, so
basically, like if you're in prison, that's a pretty good alibi that you could not have committed that crime.
Yeah, some cops of some places have figured out a way to do that anyway. so yeah. Anyway, good. So let's get back. Letitia Green named perpetrator. We are comfortable that we know everything there is to know about him, but we're not ready to go apprehend him. We got some work to do. So let's get to work. We interview all the witnesses. Everyone else is pretty weak on being able to identify. But the one great witness was the kid who opened the door. So we find him. He lives in Queens now. We knock on the door. He's a grown man. He's in his 40s, 50s. And he says to us, "You guys detectives?" And we're like, "Yeah." He's like, "What can I do for you?" And we said, "We want to talk to you about an incident that occurred in 1971. And he put his head down and he said, "I knew this day was coming. Come on in." And I said, "Okay." He's a Federal Reserve police officer. And he says to us, "I knew those guys. I knew them to be the boyfriend of the girl upstairs, so that's why I thought they were friendly. And I let him in, and he shot and killed Mr. Pact. And I've held this remorse for all these years, and I never said anything. And I told the detectives at that time I didn't know who they were, but I really did."
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so he wasn't involved in it, but he knew when it happened who
Correct.
they were.
Right. And part of his becoming a police officer was he was too embarrassed to go back and say, "I actually know, and I shouldn't have let them in, but I did, and I caused his death." He took that blame on himself, but he thought the next best way was to become a police officer.
Well, that's bullshit. If you want to become a cop, then the first thing you do is you come clean and you say, "I know who did this."
I agree. However, I don't know what goes through people's heads, right?
Yeah, well,
I
get it. But at that point, if you look, we'll save the story for later. But anyway, but yeah, he doesn't get out of this that easy. The guy has material information on
Correct.
a homicide, and he withholds it intentionally.
Correct.
Because the minute you said that, "I knew this day was coming," it told me right away. This isn't one of those things like, "Oh, hallelujah, we're going to solve the case." It's more like, "Oh shit, I got to come clean now."
So, Mark Tebbins. Hold on. We're good. Sorry. I'm guessing there was a hot dog on the grill that or a burger on the grill that hit
Oh my God,
smoker.
are you burning your house down? You're moving out of it in 2 months. You're going to burn it down before you go?
So anyway, Mark Tebbins is prepared for this witness with 2 6-pack photo arrays. Right? We have the black and white photos from 1971, the last known photos of the 2 offenders. We actually found an associate, but that associate was dead already. And so we only have 1 outstanding perp, and the other one is dead. So we can close the case on exceptional clearance, but we want to lock up and arrest and hold accountable the other offender who we know to be alive. We then take the 2 6-pack photos. We go through the process. We say, "Sir, we're going to show you a series of photos. of those photos. We'd like to see if you recognize anybody. If you do recognize them, tell us who you recognize and where do you know them from. Now, for your listeners who are not law enforcement, you don't say stuff like, do you see the killer here? Is the killer number 2? Like, that's not how it's done. The way it's done.
Although, wait a minute, Tommy, you know and I know, statistically speaking, if you want the good chance of picking who the killer is, cops usually put them in slot number 2 or number 5.
I don't know anything about psychological theories behind identifications.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Take 5 minutes to look at this picture.
Yeah, no, really, take 5 minutes. Really, take 5 minutes to
and look at number 2 and tell me what you think. Yeah.
No, honestly, I know that those games have that does not serve anybody well, but there are games. Now, that being said, Mark Tebbins, being the ultimate professional that he is, he hands over the 2 6-pack arrays one at a time. And he sits there and he says, do you recognize anybody? And if you do recognize anybody, tell us where you recognize them from. And he immediately identifies both perpetrators. He did not waffle. He did not even waste any time. And again, I can introduce that into court as my opinion. The jury will probably be told to disregard that. But for us as detectives, he knew exactly what was going on. He wasn't bullshitting, and he could identify those guys, all these years later, and 30-something, 35 years later, blah, blah, blah. So we got 2 IDs. He signs both 6-pack photo arrays, and we're good to go. All the other witnesses have been identified. Nobody can really identify. They put their pieces of the puzzle together. We go to the prosecutor's office in the Bronx. We sit down and go, here's the case, and they authorize the arrest. They say, yep, I will prosecute this case with what you have based on those girlfriends' statement, the identification from the witness, a couple of other pieces that you put together. It's a nice little case. Not the greatest case in the world. It's 30-something years old, but it's worth pursuing. Go out and arrest the guy. I am not bullshitting you. We say, okay, where's he living? He's living in a shelter, a men's shelter in Stamford, Connecticut. We're like, shit. We call up the Stamford Police Department and we say, look, what's the deal with the shelter? Do you guys know anybody over there? And Mike, you're going to really appreciate this part. We're going to say, do you know anybody over there? Can you tell us if this guy's got a bed there? And the Stamford, Connecticut detective says to us, no, we don't work that way here. And we're like, wait, what do you mean? And he's like, no, we're not allowed to know who the bedmates are in the shelter for this exact reason. I was like, what reason? I want to know if the guy's in there or not, because I'm not going to drive all the way up there back and forth every day if the guy hasn't been there in months. But his last known address, like from 6 months ago, is Stamford, Connecticut, this men's shelter. And the guy says, you're going to have to come up with a subpoena or whatever. And I'm like, Mike,
what?
You know the deal, Morgan. You know it. Steve, you know. Like, we go, yeah. All right, maybe on paper, they're not, but like, you don't know anybody over there that can give us a wink and a nod?
We're not talking about a jaywalker here. We're talking about a first-degree felony murder, robbery suspect.
Right on. So I said, okay, we'll play the game. So I say to Mark, grab Pablo, let's go up to the Stamford. Let's get a lay of the land. Let's drive around. Let's see what's going on, where to place. Because what we think is what they do is everyone sleeps there at night, but they throw you out by 8 a.m. and they allow you to come back after 6 p.m. So no one's there during the day. So you want to get them when they're all filing out or when they're all coming back in. So let's look to see what places where you can get breakfast, where can you eat, where do you hang out, where the drug spots are, whatever it is they do, right? So we'll go drive around. And while we're doing that, we'll figure out what doorways, where we're going to sit, and we'll come back the next day or two and do the surveillance to apprehend this guy. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm not shitting you. And lo and behold, we pull up to just start, okay, here's base. We're going to start from here. And like, who's that guy standing out in front? I said, Mark, I swear to God, I think that's the fucking guy. And Mark goes, there's no way. Tommy, there's no way in a million years. There's no way. And I go, dude, he's standing right in front of the shelter right now. And I'm looking at the picture. And now, granted, it's 40 years old, but I'm saying, I think that's our guy. And Mark goes, I came in. And I go to him, hey, Leroy, or whatever his name was. And I think it was Leroy. And he says, no, I'm not Leroy. And we're like, oh, man, maybe not. And then Mark, in his infinite wisdom, names a relative of Leroy's. And he says, no, this is not about you. This is about blah, 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 such and such, your relative. He got hurt. And the guy goes, what happened to him? And he goes, well, are you Leroy or not? Are you his next of kin or not? He goes, I am. I was like, gotcha.
Bada bing, bada boom. Way to go.
Yeah, I just want to highlight. You see who solves that case, right? The detective.
The detective, of course. So then we're in the car and we get on I-95, driving on I-95 with the Joker in the back, and we're passing exit after exit after exit, and we leave Stanford, we go into Westfield, and then we're in Fairfield, and the guy goes, hey, where are we going? And he goes, oh, did we not tell you? We're New York City police officers, and we're going to the Bronx. And he's like, oh, shit. We're like, yep, that's right. So while we're on our drive, I need you to think about some things. And don't think, after all these years, we don't have our shit together. So you can wallow in that while we make our way back to the Bronx. And he goes, is this about that robbery like in 1999?
Oh, Jesus.
And we're like, no, but we'll talk about that too.
We had some. I had a case. Real quick divergence. Had a case one time. I'm interviewing a guy, and I'm talking to him about a copier that's stolen. Secret Service is involved in the case. They're photocopying money. And I said, and I'm talking to this guy. I said, you got that feeling in your gut? You want to tell me about it? He goes, you mean the bank robberies? And without missing a beat, he goes, yep, that's what it was. I was talking about a burglary at an office store. We ended up clearing 5 bank robberies.
Got that right. Happens all the time.
But back to our regularly scheduled podcast. That's One More Drink.
Yeah.
All right, there it is. So this guy is obviously good for something.
He's good for a lot of things. He actually had a warrant. We found an old warrant that was never vacated, but it would never be enforced. So we used that as the ability. That gave us the probable cause to put him in handcuffs and detain him, as opposed to him voluntarily returning back to us.
Did he ever lawyer up?
So that's the thing. And I don't remember the law. There was laws that bounced around that.
It was Minnick versus Mississippi. Basically, that's one that basically got down to that said when they invoke the lawyer, it's for every case, not just the case you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I don't remember the exact nuances of that, but he never admitted to being there and doing it, which actually worked okay for us, because when we have someone known to him versus someone who's just identifying him, putting him there, it worked out and it was fine. We proceed with the case. We make the arrest. And probably one of the most important and fulfilling phone calls I made was to Harry and Miriam Pact, telling him that the arrest has been made. He's incarcerated. He's been prosecuted. He'll be going to the grand jury in a couple of days. We'll get an indictment. We're not worried about getting the indictment, and he'll go to trial. And the trial's not going to be easy because of the time and the witnesses, and they'll challenge the testimony. And I think they were happy that he died in jail, and that he never saw another free day. But I think they missed not having their day in court to
having the conviction,
and confront them.
So did he die awaiting trial?
Yes.
All right.
We never went to trial.
What's your feeling though? At that point, was Letitia solid enough that she would have come through on the trial?
Yeah, she lived a much better life in Georgia than she probably would have lived in the Bronx. So she was a productive citizen down there. Still a little bit in the game, if you will, but because she was squared away in terms of not cooperating with the police kind of thing, but she didn't have any criminal history to speak of. Nothing that would have thought that she was completely the enemy on the other side of righteousness. So I think she would have stood up and she would have been fine. And then Vasquez, again, I do realize the contempt, and I share it with you, Morgan, that we have for our federal police officer witness. However, he also did leave a very productive life. And so I think he was going to be very, very strong.
So you lost me there for a second. You talking about the guy we were talking about that I texted you about?
Yeah, the federal police officer.
Okay.
The one that opened the door and let the shooters in.
Oh, that one. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other guy that I texted you about, and you called him a skell. I'd never heard that.
Skell.
Yeah, I'd never heard that term before. By the way, tell us what a skell is.
A skell is in the transit police, we had that was the term for the homeless persons who were like, you're homeless and you're in the subway. There's plenty of people in the subways that are homeless. But when you needed to tell somebody that they were not showered and had not had a lot of treatment, and they were, had parasites and bugs, and I mean, some of these homeless people have lived and not showered in years and years and years. So a skell in the subway system and housing is it's the one word term that I can use to tell you that this guy is really funky. He's probably got diseases. He's got parasites and bugs and all sorts of things on him. So that's the differentiation between a homeless person who's getting fairly decent care, getting showered and medical treatment and staying fairly healthy, versus someone who's completely disregarded all hygiene, all nutrition, all medical care. And so that's just the terminology. And then that became the terminology for someone who's just, a dirtbag.
So I got to tell you, so when we were down at the San Diego, Southern California Gang Conference, Murph and I were down there. And the guys down there are just fantastic. So we meet this guy. I don't want to mention his name anymore because, like I said, I don't want to give this guy airtime. Former NYPD guy, did 14 years for him and his partner working with a drug gang. And this guy, Murph, you were there. He approached us. Mm-hmm. He goes, he heard about our podcast. He goes, oh, guess what, guys? I am podcast gold. He told us that. He goes, I am podcast gold. And I'm like, what this is before I really knew his story. I said, what the hell are you talking about? And then he starts telling his story. And Murph, I got to tell you, my freaking jaw just hit the floor.
Yeah. A guy that he wanted to come up and talk to everybody so bad. And once everybody back in the green room found out who he was, other than the host who had to be nice to him, they just turn you back on. I didn't want to say good morning, goodbye, kiss my ass or anything. I have nothing to do with you, man.
When we had our event that evening, did you come? Yeah, you were down. You came down with us to that pizza place, right? I thought about he was getting ready for an Uber or a Lyft to the airport, and I saw his bag. He left his bag there, and I thought, oh, what if I just hide his bag? And he can't find it. But I'm a good guy. I didn't do anything like that. I thought about it, but I didn't do anything, because that's one of the guys that you and I talked about. Murph's like, you know what? We've talked to perps, and bad guys, and not a bad girl yet. We're working on that, but people who have done some bad stuff but turned their life around. But I have no use. The difference on this one, though, was Tommy and Mike, you guys appreciate this. If he was truly repentant, it'd be one of those things, hey, here's a cautionary tale. Here's something you should learn. This guy reveled in the fact that he was this bad cop, that he was this bad guy. He enjoyed it. And I'm like, well, fuck you.
Yeah, he was laughing about it. He thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, he thought it was hilarious.
Was he the guy who, I don't want you to mention his name at all. We'll get it offline for sure. But was he the guy that was with Dowd?
No, it was Dowd himself. We talked to Dowd.
Oh, it was Dowd himself. Okay.
Yeah. And I know who you're talking about, the other guy, because somebody else said, hey, you ought to talk to this guy. And I'm like, once I saw he was connected with the first guy, I said, not a chance.
No, they're both POSs in a big, big way.
That is an acronym that stands for piece of shit. We will define that for you. Hey, Mike, look, we kind of cannibalized some of the time, but we want to talk about with a case that you, like Tommy, found interesting.
Tommy, what did I find interesting? Tell me.
I think Mike was even keeled, and you never knew that he was more enthusiastic on one case than another case. I think he hit them all equally. passionately and with competency.
Let's
There's
talk
some
about
good,
Wait, this isn't
you know what?
job
There's a
interview.
good story, Mike. You got a great story, even though the guy didn't die and how he did not die, and the crew that hurt him. Why don't you talk about what about Jeremy Deloitte?
Yeah, so Jeremy Deloitte was
Hey,
a.
have you guys noticed this though? Still to this day, Tommy is giving direction and guidance to one of his detectives to say, "Hey, how about this?" He didn't tell him to talk about it. He just said, "Hey, how about this one? I think this is a good one."
Yeah, so I was going to go down the cold case route because I have one that I like, but since Tommy told me to do this one, then I'll
let's
do.
talk about what you like.
Wait,
I wasn't in the cold case squad, right? So I couldn't really, do the cold case stuff, but
Well,
but
let's
yeah,
talk now. Let's hold on. Time out. We're going to call a audible here. Let's talk about the case you want to talk about. Tommy kind of gave you an idea, but you obviously like this cold case. Which one is it?
so my partner in the squad, when I finally got over there and ended up working with him, he was working a homicide from 1989, and what they had done is, and again, I'm a baby on the job, 89. There was a guy who was abducted. We learned later, who's abducted from the Bronx, brought to Brooklyn, brought down in the basement of a house on Madison Street, and they cut his head off with a chainsaw. And in the middle of cutting his head off with a chainsaw, the chainsaw ran out of gas.
Oh, geez.
Oh, that's
So then
gotta suck.
Oh yeah, so then they had to hack out his head. Now they did this in front of a whole bunch of witnesses.
So why did they kill him in the first place?
Yeah, so what happens is it's
Can I just say something before we go? I know the story. I know the caper. I'm involved. Like Mike, you got like I was there for in the middle of it. It kind of. This is a great story. This is definitely the right story to tell.
So what happens is there's a pretty well-known established drug dealer from the neighborhood. He ends up having a package ripped off. And I guess this other crew of drug dealers told him, they said, hey, even show up with the money or show up with the person's head who committed the homicide. So throughout the investigation, what we learned is they drove up to the Bronx, right? This drug dealer with two other people. And all these witnesses are identified. And they abduct a squeegee man. So for the folks who are listening who might not know what a squeegee man is, back in the late 80s, early 90s, you had folks that would come over and scrub down your windshield. For a better term, most of the people used to call them bums. They'd be panhandling, but they would be the squeegee people. So long story short is Gregory Ross is up there. Gregory Ross is former military, fell on bad luck, does heroin. So he's down on his luck. He's at the squeegee, and he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He gets abducted at gunpoint, and they drive him back down to Brooklyn. Now, you have to picture this. When this homicide occurs, the building is a brownstone. The basement of the brownstone is used as a shooting gallery for the drug addicts. So it's packed. It's packed. There's people outside on the street. There's people in the basement, the whole 9 yards. The car pulls up. They got this guy. They take him out of the car. His hands are bound. He's got a hood over his head. They drag him around the back of the building and they put him in the basement and they make everybody leave. The three guys, the main drug dealer, I won't even mention his name, but the main drug dealer and his crew now proceed to beat this guy. You got to remember, he's innocent, right? At the end of the day, he's truly innocent, right? And they're beating him, and next thing you know, people, and when I say people, there's anywhere from 5 to 15 witnesses that are actually looking through the cracks, through the basement windows, watching this whole thing. They get the chainsaw, and they start the chainsaw, broom, broom, it starts, and through his head, they start to go right through the jawline, across the neck. The pictures are absolutely, offline. You would be shocked. And then it runs out of gas. So they send this young kid out over to the gas station to get more gas with a little red can. He comes back because the gas station on Troop Avenue was closed, so he can't get any more gas. And they proceed to chop the rest of his head off with an axe, like a small hatchet. They come out of the basement. All of the people are standing there, and they have his head in a bag, in the brown bag, and they just say, they just hold it up in the air, they get in the car, and they drive away. They pay these two crackheads, at the time it was like $10, to move the body from the basement across the street. Now, across the street from this location was an elementary school.
Move the body without the head.
Correct. They just wanted it out of the drug spot, right? So think about that. The guy who runs the drug spot, let's say the shooting gallery, he's like, you gotta get we can't have, people can't get high if the body's down here.
Oh, well, gee, yeah, let's talk about, creating the proper atmosphere and the ambiance. Hey, look, we want you guys to get high, but we don't want a headless body hanging around here.
Jeez.
So who would you pick to do that? Your two best people. Two of the guys that always get high, they've now take a shopping cart, they drag the body upstairs, put it in a shopping cart, wheel it across the street, and what they're going to do is throw it in the elementary school's dumpster. But both of these crackheads cannot lift the body up, so they can't get it into the dumpster. So they proceed just to put a black paper garbage bag on it and just leave it next to the dumpster. Right. So you know what the next day is, right?
Oh yeah, school day.
Smell. It's school.
It's the elementary kids come into school, and what do they come across? Hey, there's Johnny in a bag, right? He's just in a black bag. They just see the feet. They let the custodian know. Custodian comes out, and now you have a guy with no head. The crime scene gets all set up. The detectives are able to follow the blood trail, find the shopping cart behind the building they killed him in, go down in the basement, and who's sleeping down in the basement? The two guys who tried to dump the body, right? So within 24, you hear the first 48, within the first 48, they knew who did the homicide. But back in the day, you have to have your witnesses. You have to bring them in. You have to take a statement. Then you have to call the DA's office. The DA's office then has to come down and take a statement. Maybe the DA is busy. Now you have to bring these witnesses down to the DA's office, right? We go through this whole thing. Both of these guys are super heroin guys. So they're so sick 90% of the time that they can't even get through it. The detectives do a phenomenal job. Guys from Brooklyn North Homicide, guys from the squad, they're able to identify all of these witnesses who are all heroin addicts. One of the witnesses is so traumatized after he gives his statement to the DA's office that he goes into a drug rehab for 2 years. Now, you guys are familiar. When you go into the drug rehab, you're gone. Nobody knows where you are. They can't find you, right? Because it's secrecy, the whole 9 yards, right? The case moves along. We understand who the bad guy is. We're actually, the guys from the squad actually worked this case really hard, but every time they grab this guy up, and in New York, we call it an I card. We drop an I card for somebody. He gets locked up in a different precinct. Now we are keeping tabs on him. Every time that he comes into custody, they cannot find the witnesses because the witnesses are homeless junkies, right? When they do find the witnesses, they can't find him. So this is like cat and mouse, right? Like whack-a-mole. You're trying to get them all in the same place, which is extremely hard. I come into the squad. I'm under the tutelage of the great Lieutenant Tommy Joyce. I work with the
Wait a minute. This sounds like a paid advertisement.
I mean, after he told the story, I mean, there's nothing more that I can do. But what I'll say to you is that, I was blessed on NYPD to work with detectives. Again, I'll shout my old partner Kevin Slag out because he was the craziest person that you could ever possibly work with, but he had a work ethic and he had a way of communicating with people that was absolutely outstanding. This was his case, so when I finally came into the homicide shooting team, I got to pick it up and work alongside him as we went. And I have to tell you, when I said to you, we managed the 400 open ones, we had to close 6 cold cases a year between the two of us. And we always hit our number or a little bit more. right? So we were pretty active in what we were doing, and in all of that time under Tommy, we were also doing the federal cases. So we were doing it. It was pretty good. Long story short, we come to find out, like, so my partner moves on. He gets he ends up retiring. Now I got this case, and what we're able to do is our perpetrator went into federal custody, right? And like I want to say in the early 2000s, he went into federal custody, and then he disappeared. Nobody knew where he was. We used Accurant to LexisNexis. We used LexisNexis. I swear we rebuilt that neighborhood. We were able to identify witnesses that lived on that block that had never been interviewed by the police. Some of these witnesses were absolutely eyeballs to the whole thing. They lived out of state. They were more than comfortable to talk and tell you what happened that night, right? The little caveat was, oh, this happened so long ago. You'll be, to be honest with you, this is a legend in Brooklyn. Like this headless guy being his head cut off with a chainsaw was like a legend. So anyway, long story short, we have our perp now who went into federal custody but totally disappeared. He shows up on no public records. Bureau of Prison never shows him leaving federal custody. Why? Any ideas, guys? What happened to him?
He's either still serving his prison sentence, he died, or he escaped.
Negative. He witnessed
federal witness protection.
Yes. He witnessed a corrections officer in Florida beat down and kill an inmate. He became a federal witness. He went into the witness identification program, right?
Witness protection. WITSAC.
Yeah. So when he went into WITSAC that they profit him, right? So now I'm doing the FBI stuff. I'm doing the federal cases, right? Now we're like, oh, wait a second. This guy did a profit? He had to, right? Because you know how that works. You have to tell everything wrong that you did, or you're not covered, or you void your profit. So anyway, we're able to covertly find out that he's still in custody, and we reach out to the U.S. attorney.
Hold on. You used the word covertly. Come on now.
It's a lot of different people doing a lot of different favors, right? Because the feds are tight, right? And nobody wants to do anything. But like I got all the witnesses now. Like even the guys who were the worst junkies then are all cleaned up now. They're still a mess, but they're in place. So I went down. I got these guys re-audio, re in front of the grand jury. We're ready to go. We just have to get our guy. The DA's office wants me to get a statement from him, but we can't still prove that he's in federal custody. So I called this U.S. attorney who has his case, and I said, hey, you guys have this guy as a witness. You know what his thing is? Whoa, no, we don't have a witness. I don't know what you're talking about. I go, well, if you did, he cut somebody's head off with a chainsaw back in Brooklyn. I'm sure in the profit he would have told you that. This guy goes, I'm going to have to make a quick phone call.
which is basically the way of saying, no, this is the first time we've heard that.
Mm-hmm. So you know who he calls? He calls the perp in the jail.
Oh my God.
And says, hey, did you fail to tell us about that chainsaw? He goes, how do you know about that? Everybody's dead. And he goes, I don't want to say anything else to you. So they void out his proffer agreement, put him back in general population, right? And then we go down and get him. I got recorded calls because the feds do it. When they do it right. But his jail calls are all about to his family going, all these people that were there that night. Find these people. You told me they were all dead.
So he's trying to manage the case from the inside. What is he? Is it basically a way of saying go out and put a hit on these guys, or what?
He's saying that they should never be testifying. So as we started to go out and try and find these witnesses, we would get family members who an hour after we went and visited them would call us up and say, hey, this guy's family came to visit us. They just wanted to make sure we were okay. Yeah, it's subtle, right? It's subtle in the whole way they did it. Not like so much like, where's so and so? Hey, grandma, we just wanted to stop in and see you. Just just to send the message that if it needed to be, we could touch you. And we ended up extraditing him back because, he had done all his Fed time. So once they released him, we just waited for him. Once they released him, we had the marshals bring him back, and then they charged him in Brooklyn with that. He ended up taking a plea because the DA's office, like you were talking about with Tommy, the witnesses, we weren't really sure if they were going to truly be able to hold up. They were really reluctant to this whole thing because all of their family lived in the neighborhood. Some of the family lived in the same building or next to the, you know what I mean? Like the mothers still went to church together, you know. But that one, like what I want to, I guess, and Tommy would tell you, the guys in the 7-9 squad, and they actually, I consider myself like that. It was the relentlessness. Like it never ended. Like that hunt when people used to say, "Oh, you're working on my case" or something like that. Oh, we absolutely are. We're pulling your case every 6 months just to see if there's anything new. That stuff with the public records that Tommy talked about and why he got hired over there. I'm telling you, we could rebuild a whole neighborhood and find the witnesses that were never spoken to. You couldn't even hide behind the door anymore. We knew you lived there at that point, and we just wanted to come and talk. And you know how that starts.
And that is the biggest people forget is that when people don't feel safe, they don't want to give information to the police. And without witnesses, you might have physical evidence, but at some point, you guys all know this. You got to have people who are willing to get up on the stand, raise their right hand, and tell you what was going on. DNA evidence is powerful, fingerprint, but it's very powerful to have the actual witnesses themselves to do that. Tommy, you raised your hand. I've never seen anybody raise their hand on this before.
I just figured it out, man.
You can't be trained after all these years.
While Mike is yapping away, I got it all figured out.
Wait a minute, Mike, yapping away?
I only wanted to take 10 minutes, Tommy. That's all.
So I read a book called Headquarters, and it was written by a gentleman. He was an inspector, the equivalent of the chief of detectives at the time. His name was Francis Xavier McCormick. And he wrote this book, and I want to say it was published in the 30s. And his time was in the turn of the 20th century. And they talked about, and this is, I'm going to paraphrase, but I think you'll get it. He said, with all of our modern technology, now he's writing this book in the 30s. With all of our modern technology that we have today, criminal investigations still come down to that stool pigeon, and we don't use the word stool pigeon anymore, but they did back then, to some stool who's holed up in some hotel room who has everything and knows the whole story. And so I would even go as far as saying to today, on August 29, 2022, that with all the DNA and all the forensics and all the technical stuff, you still need people to tell you something they're reluctant to tell you. Never going to go away, ever, because those are the pieces, the human in the loop part, that is going to put all these cases together. So detectives listening right now, I don't care how good you are in the computers. I don't care if you can run an Esri ArcGIS map instead of a pin map back in the day. I don't care if you know DNA and forensics and loci and all of those things. If you don't know how to extract information from people that they're reluctant to give you, you will not solve cases.
I went through an FBI course, a guy, one of the original members of the FBI Behavioral Science Unit. He called it Goya Cod. You want to solve cases? It's called Goya Cod. Get off your ass, knock on doors.
So the other part to that is and again, I look at my little guy. He's young on the job, but I give him the same advice that the old timers, some old squad guy, and his partner Spotto and Danny Comerson, they came downstairs one day and addressed us at roll call as rookies, and they said, "Listen, every day you're here, you're only here for one reason. You're here to build on the skills for the case that you hope you never catch. And that case is the death of a member of the service. And at that time, whatever role you're in, whether you're a police officer, you're a detective, you're in the crime scene unit, all of your skills are going to be called upon to solve that, right? It almost sounds like a Godfather thing, right? Like, all of your skills are going to be needed to do, what you need to do." And that was so profound when them guys said that. And I used to watch the old school detectives come down, sit down, shoot basketballs, buy a 6-pack for the guys at the part. And they grabbed us and they said, every time you walk down the street, have a conversation with every single person you pass. Every single person. You're on a foot post, speak to everyone, stop in the store, say hello. Every one of those people will be somebody that, you're going to have to be able to do that. And to be honest with you, when we spoke to all of these witnesses, you got to remember, I'm showing up in 2008 after these people had thought this guy cut somebody's head off in 1980, 89, 88. They thought that was behind them. And here I was, their worst nightmare, showing up at the door. So I had to build that rapport with them that it was going to be okay, that we were going to be able to do this, that I needed your help, that the family needed your help, that, attach a name to the victim, so that we could do all of that, right? Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. There was a couple of them who didn't want to be involved and there was nothing you could do. But the ones that we had on board that we put back into the grand jury, they would call me directly. Hey, Mike, what's going on? You hear anything? Like, how's this going? My grandmother said somebody else came to the house. And then we would go over and visit grandma. You know what I mean? Like, and make her feel like she was okay. It was that connection. I don't see that connection anymore because the guys are all knee deep in their phones, right? Like, even sometimes in the interview room, I would sit with guys who were just looking at their phone. Like we're
that
here.
Phone ain't going to solve the case, Skippy.
I got news for you. I'm going to interrupt right there. Mike, I got to be honest with you. That's on the squad commander. Why is he even allowing phones to be anywhere even near the case when the stuff is happening? That's crazy. That is crazy to me.
Again, the whole thing is I remember watching guys would be in the interview room and me and my partner would be at the window watching the whole interview. So we would stand for 5 hours while these guys went, and when they got tired, we would jump in. And when we had a whole line of questioning that we would do, you know how that works. And again, it was just a matter of finding the right way along it. I have to tell you, and this is just for me. In my career, I got selected for the hostage negotiation team, and that only improved all of the fundamental communication skills. Because I found myself now ad hoc. We didn't have a separate team. We worked the squad, and then if something happened, they would call you out. But you would go every day in New York City, emotionally disturbed people, EDPs, are barricaded, and they would call you out to. And I mean, these are the hardest people in the world to communicate with.
Because they don't rationalize the same way we do. They don't reason the same way we do. It's very difficult to apply your view of the world to their view of the world.
Correct, 100% correct. And again, so you would go through the 8, the 10, the 12-hour negotiation with somebody who believed that there were flies flying all around. You know what I mean? And I have to tell you, it just made you patient. It made you okay. It made you a better listener so you were able to do it. And then when you get the guys come into the squad room, to the box, because I think Tommy says it the best. I want you in the box because I don't just want you to confess. I want you to write it out, and then really I want you to act it out for the DA's office. I want to have such a good rapport that you feel comfortable enough to stand up and show me how you shook that baby. Show the DA. Come on, show the DA how. I mean, they have kids too. We all get frustrated, and then next thing you know, that guy is banging the baby, the doll's head off the wall, and you're like, it's gonna be pretty hard to step away from that video, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
So and again, I just think I think these were the cornerstone parts of what it was. And then I mean, for me, that case is one of my favorite ones because it's so crazy. Like when you say about the chainsaw and stuff like that. But that case, it's more for me about the true guys I worked with in the squad. I can't say enough. Kevin Slegg worked that case. I'm telling you, it was crazy. And then when he left, he was like, "You have to work this case. Like it's crazy." And we did, and we were able to close it. And it's just it's a testament. Right, Tom. We were pounding those things out.
Yeah, it's so. I'll tell you a story that takes you personal on how hard detectives work, and this goes across the country. Federal, state, local cops. If you're in it, you're in it. I won't shy away from the fact that the job most likely cost me my first marriage. I was married to the job. Again, here's a guy didn't even want to take the test, only did it because I had nothing else to do that day. Found out falling in love with it, and there were other things. I'm not going to pretend that the job was the sole cost of it. However, the nights and the weekends and the not being home and the missed, holidays and birthdays and all of those things, and then add to that reputations of what cops are and stuff like that. So court TV in the early 2000s, we had a serial killer. His name is Vincent Johnson. He killed 7 girls in Brooklyn North, a couple in the 90th precinct, a couple in the 7-9. The 7-9 was Rhonda Tucker and Katrina Niles were the 2 girls that we had. And then there was 5 others, 3 or 4 in the 9-0 in Williamsburg, and then 1 more somewhere else. And anyway, Court TV was following around Brooklyn North homicide, doing a documentary type thing at that time. And I'll never forget that while they were filming that, when it actually aired and they were following the serial killer case that we were working on, the detective was looking out the window and the sun was coming up, and they had set it up that he had been working for like 16 hours already. And he's like, shit, the sun's coming up. I didn't even get a chance to go to sleep yet. I didn't even get anything to eat yet. And now the sun's coming up. It's going to be, I got to get to this witness's house by 8:00. And then you see them working through, and they really laid out, like, these guys and gals lay down for an hour or two, get a little bit of shut-eye. They refuel on cigarettes and coffee, and they're back out with Dorito chips, Chinese food, and they're back at it again, and it doesn't stop, and it never stops, and it keeps going, and it doesn't stop. And my ex-wife looked at me and said, wait, those guys are really working through the night? And I go, yeah. And they're not, and these are guys I work with. These are my friends on TV in front of, and she says to me, I never believed you when you guys said you worked through the night and worked 36 or 72 straight hours and never stopped. I always thought you guys were all running around. And I go, now you tell me this? Our marriage is gone, right? But I'll bet you there's tons of police officers who are working in this manner, and nobody at home who doesn't understand believes you could have this much energy for what you're doing.
Look, man, when it gets going, and Murph, you know this too.
Steve, I can't imagine anyone would know more than you, Steve.
Yeah,
adrenaline goes.
We make a point of telling everybody being a cop is not a 9 to 5. It's a lifestyle. And if you don't have the right family, and I'm on my second wife, and we've been, thank the good Lord, we've been married 38 years now.
Same here, 35 years going on 36.
I'm on number 2 too. Mike's the only one in the bunch with a single wife, but I will say you only get married a second time once, so there is that.
Then you're not a divorcee. You're a widower.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, a little part to that too is that there's the family, but then also when you explain to other detectives or who might work in other jobs somewhere else, like, hey, my partner Kevin and I went in for a 4 to 12, right? It's our turnaround. So what that means is we do the 4 to 1, we're off from 1 to 8, and then we come back for an 8 to 4. Well, on that 4 to 1, we're the only 2 detectives in the squad. First hour, we catch a non-fatal shooting. Third hour, we catch a special category missing. Fourth hour, we catch a homicide. Now we're working into the midnight, right? On the midnight, I catch a homicide. We come in for the day tour. We're the only 2 detectives that are working in the office that day. Kevin catches another homicide. That's 3 homicides that we're working. 2 detectives. I catch 2 non-fatal shootings at the end of that. And you look outside and you're like, I didn't get home. That started on a Friday night. I didn't get home until Wednesday morning. We lived, for those who don't know, on crave cases of White Castle and onion. We had for dinner. We had them for breakfast. I still today think I still smell like the onion rings from that one whole week.
Well, so let me just add one thing to give you the sense of, obviously this is the most extreme example you could ever hear in terms of a busy day. But Mike talks about that kind of a day that happens. That's not every day, but it does happen. And then you transition to the private sector and people tell you about bad days. And I just laugh and I'm like,
are you kidding me, Skippy?
I get it. It's okay. No problem. And I don't say nothing,
It's
but
like
I was
the latte wasn't served correctly. You had to wait an extra 5 minutes because the highway was backed up.
I like being, after Tommy got me over at Lexus, I like being on the call where they were talking about changing the coloring of the product, like the skin color of the product. And this call went on for a couple of hours. And then finally somebody said to me, "Hey, Mike, you used to be out there using it. What do you think?" I said, I really don't know what to think, because about 2 weeks ago I was standing in somebody's living room telling them that their 8-year-old kid was the victim of a homicide. And after that, nobody talked to me.
So the worst day ever is in terms of case after case after case is going to be 9/11, and Mike and I are very small contingent of police officers / detectives that have done something that nobody else in the world can ever claim, and that is looking for a homicide perp on the morning of September 11th, 2001, not finding that person, going to breakfast to get a break, get something to eat. We started like early morning hits to make an apprehension at like 4 or 5 in the morning. We struck out. We couldn't find the murder perp that we were looking for. We go to breakfast. The planes hit on 9/11. We go to the top of, what was it? Is it 356 Clausen, Mike? 256 Clausen?
325?
325 Clausen Avenue. And then we're standing on top. We see the towers fall. We then get notified at 2:00 in the afternoon. We're scrambling on the 9/11 related, September 11th and the planes situation. We're notified that a homicide perp that we arrested in August for killing his wife and son on what was that, 110 Halsey Aziz, Chris Scandol's case, and we're now told that prisoner who was hospitalized is now available and he's getting discharged from the hospital, so we have to go process him. So we have to run over in the middle of all the 9/11 related activities. We have to go get him, process him. And then we're doing the 9/11 evacuation of the lower Manhattan people. They're coming over the bridge in droves, and they're coming over through the tunnels, and however way they're coming over, they're covered in soot and everything. And 11:00 at night, we get notified in our precinct, the 7-9, the only homicide in New York City on September 11th, 2001, unrelated to the event. We had to handle a robbery, shooting, homicide on that night as well. So that's 3 homicides in the same day, plus 9/11 and everything we did that. And then Mike eventually worked on that case, and he's a Polish immigrant by the name of Henryk Siwiak, and Mike picked up that case and ran with that for years and years and years. And I'm looking at the time, and I don't know that you have enough time, but he could give you an update as to where that case sits.
Well, I think what we're going to do, this is kind of a good point to kind of bring things to a close, because we will bring you back for volume 2 of the Magnus Opus called NYPD, the exploits of Mike Prate and Tommy Joyce. We're going to have to do this again, because we cannot do it justice by trying to shrink it down into the time we have remaining.
Don't rush it.
No, because look, the stories are compelling, and look, the 9/11 is a whole thing we want to dive into, but not right now, because we've been going on this for 3.5 hours now, going on 4 here pretty quickly. So what I think we do is we bring this one to a close, but what we do is we get your guys' ironclad commitment that we're going to do this again. We'll set it up. We'll do it again like, we did today. Have some drinking going on, because obviously that makes it go much faster and much funner. And then we get more stuff out of Tommy that he will neither confirm nor deny, but obviously admit to, like moving the pins on a pin map into the shape of a penis for his commander. I can already see it. Sorry.
I I will not.
It's not a denial. It is not denial, though, Tommy.
I can honestly tell you there was some good maps that pointed as a penis towards Tommy's head, but I won't say who.
Hey, well, this is fun stuff too because, like I said, Tommy done a lot of excellent work on the cold case stuff. Obviously, you're a member of the International Homicide Investigators Association. Proudly a member of that. Love doing that kind of work. Mike, you're going to be on camera next time, you cheap bastard.
I am.
You go get a camera.
Expensive one too. You know what I'm going to charge out, right, Tommy?
Oh yeah, hit it up.
Hey, look, you need it for client meetings. Don't tell me you don't have client meetings.
You'd be surprised if you look around, whether it be LinkedIn or whatever. I'm pretty low key. Yeah, I'm pretty hard to find out there.
Yeah, Mike is stealth.
Well, I'll find you. By the way,
I'm pretty sure I found you on Google.
Oh, you probably did. Just on.
Hey, yeah, Murph and I have a buddy by the name of Billy Sarukas, U.S. Marshal Service.
Oh, I know Billy very well.
Yeah, so you know this too. So Murph and JP were in Chicago doing an event, and Billy, without even being told, tell him Murph.
Oh man, we're going to speak at the City Winery in Chicago. So we're staying out next to the airport and grab an Uber to bring us in the city. We're getting out of the car, and here comes Sarukas going, "Hey, Murph." I said, and it's been a long time since I'd seen him. I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" He tracked us down to the frickin' City Winery, Chicago, to deliver us some autographed books.
Oh my God, that's hilarious!
I'm like, dude, man, that's pretty slick.
If we want to find you, Mike, I got to tell you, we're gonna find you. You know what I mean?
I have no doubt about that.
Okay, you're easy to find. You're hiding in your basement. You're not leaving it. We gotta send you Cheetos.
I bet he's in Virginia somewhere.
Yeah. No, he's in New York. If he was in Virginia, he would be easy to find. Here's a guy that I couldn't understand. He said Times Square, something about that. That's all I know.
Yeah, I didn't quit. Tommy quit. He left, but
I did quit.
Yeah. Well, that's a story for another day. So let's do this. Let's bring this to a close. We do want to talk about what you're doing now, but we're going to save that for the next episode because I want this to be part one. We're going to do Tales of the NYPD as told through the eyes of Tommy and Mike. So, hey, but look, you gave some fantastic stories. One takeaway I want everybody to remember is just remember the relentlessness of both Mike and Tommy about the things they went after, the things they did. And you're right, Tommy. You catch, I don't want to say a standard homicide, but you catch a homicide. Most people don't see their bed for 3 days, just on a regular homicide. Not counting all the other stuff you guys are doing. So for the folks wondering out there, are people committed? Are they dedicated to this job? Dedicated to the point that it costs them their marriages, but they look at it going, it serves a higher purpose because if not me, who? And if not now, when? So my hat's off to you, and just a whole nother level of respect for the guys at NYPD for what you guys did.
Oh, we always love talking to NYPD guys because you guys have some unbelievable stories. And I tell you what, when you're a cop coming out of town, I mean, it used to be cops looked out, professional courtesy to each other. Not so much around the United States now, but whenever you come to New York, when you come to the Big Apple to visit, if you run into a cop and you tell them, "Hey, I used to be on the job," you're like part of the brotherhood. You guys are unbelievable in New York. I love it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I would say we haven't seen all of that all the time, but I'm glad to hear it. And what I will say, and I think Mike can attest to this too, and it's the reason why, Morgan, I got to meet you years ago, and Steve getting to know you recently. And then we have another common friend, Ron Brooks, too.
Yeah,
he's a really good friend. And that's another example of having left the police department and got to work with providers and vendors of technology. And I act, and I know Mike does the same thing, we act like we're still on the job because our companies that we work for don't always like the things we say because we're massively advocating for the customer first, not the revenue first, right? And I think you win if you do that, you win anyway because they'll eventually buy from you anyway. But that being said, having that ability has given me, I've been in every agency, federal, state, and local, every state. I've been in 47 states. I've met the most amazing police officers, men and women, detectives, analysts, whatever. There are some people out there that I sit there and I'm not going to bullshit anybody, that I scratch my head and I go, how the hell did they catch anybody? They don't know what the hell they're doing. On the other side of that coin, though, is I've met some of the most impressive people in some of the craziest places, cities that you would never think, never even get mentioned, but truly dedicated, truly committed, truly amazingly competent people. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful gift to leave the NYPD, travel around the country, even around the world. They've been international on some capers and some customers and conferences that I've got to meet people. And it truly is the most noble profession. I stand by it. I defy anyone to prove me wrong. It is the hardest job in the world to do. I'm not military notwithstanding. That's a different conversation. But as a job, as a profession, it's the hardest job in the world, where you get the least amount of support and the least amount of tools and the least amount of training to do the most important job you can.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you, I had a chance to talk to a Green Beret who's now a congressman, a guy named Mike Waltz. But when I told him what I used to do, he said, look, the difference between you and us, we might be downrange for a year, 18 months. You guys are living this day in and day out, 20 years, and stuff. So it takes a different kind of toll. There's tolls and there's different kind of tolls. And you're right. So, hey, look, we want to conclude by, folks can't see this, but this is me saluting both you, Tommy, and Mike. You guys get our undying respect for what you guys did. But I'll tell you, for me, what's important is when you hear the sincerity, when you hear the passion that they still have after all of these years for the cases, for the victims. They know the names, they know the locations and stuff. What does that tell you? Somebody who didn't care would go, hey, wasn't there this one case one time? You guys are specific about people, places, times, dates, things like that. It shows that you care. And this is just me saying, thank you for your service there.
I'm telling you, I can reach into a basket right on my desk right now and pull out copies of paperwork and DD5s and stuff that it just never stops.
Never ends.
Yeah. Honor to have you guys on the show. Thank you both for being here.
All right. Well, Steve, so this last wrap up, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, it was an honor and a privilege, and everything that you say, Tommy has given me the opportunity to work in the corporate side of the world. And again, we never forget the people that we served with, right? So every presentation we do, we recognize the guys killed in the line of duty. We recognize the guys who lost their life to suicide. We home that message home every single day, every single presentation.
Amen, brother.
Excellent.
I thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
All right. So don't any of you guys go anywhere. We got one quick drinking thing to talk about. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. Say what you want, but man, we could have gone on for 6 hours, 10 hours. I mean, there were just stories after stories, and some of the famous names, some of the rappers they talk about that they worked on, the cases, the homicides. And I thought it was pretty instructive too. Tommy was very, very direct about this too. I mean, you can tell it affected him. When you think about the number of people in the rap business today that got their start based on homicides, robberies, other stuff like that. Anyway, just a lot of good stories and a lot of great work, especially the cold cases they talked about. I mean, just the years that they worked on some of these things and how they went back on that one case, just years, and solved the stuff. So just kudos to those guys for a job well done.
Exactly. I agree with you 100% there. Just think, if you're the family member of a victim of a murder and it hasn't been solved, how would you feel? But then you find out that you've got these heroes out there, these unsung heroes whose job it is to not just forget about it and put it in a file cabinet and, oh, it was never solved. These guys are still pursuing the murderers of your loved one. I mean, actual true heroes, true Americans in action. You just heard their stories. Phenomenal. Our hats are off to them. And just thank you so much, Tommy and Mike, for coming on the show here. You brought a new era to this, that this is the first we've done like this. So loved having you guys on the show. Hope to have you back in the future.
Yeah, trust me, it'll be easy. They got more stories, and Tommy and I got more drinking to do. We're going to get Mike on camera this next time, so no getting away from this. Anyway, so guys, let us bring this then to a close. We appreciate it once again. Again, share it with the family, bring the family together, head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. It's a magical thing for the family. The kids learn a lot from doing this. Trust me, it will make them better citizens, better people. Just gone over there, hit those 5 stars. Also head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for more information about the show. We update it all the time. Also follow us on social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes podcast on Facebook, and that thing called the Instagram. Also, make sure you go over to the Game of Crimes fan group. Just go to Facebook and search for Game of Crimes fans. The Mafia Queen herself, Sandy Salvato, will anoint you. She will wave her hand over you. If you could just even answer a couple questions, just even in the ballpark, put blue, red, green. Just say Morgan said blue, and just look, give it a shot. Give it a shot, and you'll agree. Also, PayPal.com. Use our email, GameOfCrimesPodcast@gmail.com, or PayPal.me/GameOfCrimes. Whatever makes it easier for you to help support the show. But Steve, let's end up with saying what people ought to do. What should they do? What's the absolute thing they need to do before Christmas, and share one, tell one with everyone they know?
Absolutely. Come over and check us out on Patreon. And you know what? Since Christmas is only, 3-4 months away now?
Close enough, yeah.
What better Christmas gift than giving somebody a yearly subscription to our Patreon channel, where you hear all this extra content. You'll hear the Q&A. You'll hear us go through a law enforcement movie once a month, and we'll do the narcometer rating on it. You can't make.
By the way, that's patented. Can't use that without the permission of Ricky Bobby Inc. That's patented.
Ricky Bobby. He's not from West Virginia, in case you were wondering. It's just, we've got so much content on there. You're guaranteed to be entertained. There's an opportunity for you to come on and ask us questions. Whatever you want to ask us, we'll do our best to answer them. It might not be the truth, but we'll make crap up and you'll love it.
And you won't know the difference, because we don't know the difference. We can't remember. So, hey guys, but no, really, we appreciate you guys helping us, supporting the show. Share one, tell one, let your friends know what you're listening to. Let them know it's over on Game of Crimes, where you get the most authentic, the most real stories that are out there. And if this isn't a proof of it, I don't know what is, because this was the real deal this week. So Anyway, I end by saying, once again, to you players out there, thank you once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, and New York state of mind, Game of Crimes.